380 ACP in our non-expanding test, and this ammunition, all of it was provided by one of my Patreon members, Edward B. So thank you so much for that ammunition. So, you know, with the 380 ACP, a lot of times what you'll see is ammunition that doesn't really want, or the bullets don't want to expand. Hollow point bullets don't want to expand very well, and if they do, they don't penetrate very well. So a lot of people like the idea of using something that's not designed to expand, but that will do well without expansion. So what we have is our Fort Scott TUI, and I believe that is a 95 grain. We have our 68 grain Lehigh Defense brand with the Xtreme Defender bullet, 68 grain, and we have our NovX, NovX Engagement Xtreme. Interesting name. It sounds like the days leading up to my first marriage. 380 ACP, and this is a plus P, and it is only a 56 grain. So there's no rate of velocity on the Fort Scott TUI. The Lehigh ammunition says 1100 feet per second through a 3.8 inch barrel. That's really close to what this is. And our NovX doesn't have a barrel length, but it says 1400 feet per second, 244 foot-pounds. So what I'm gonna test this stuff out of is our M&P Shield EZ 380 ACP. And this brings to a point of this being a plus P 380. I would not run that through most pistols. Probably the only thing I would run that through would be through this, or probably a Glock 42 or something like that. Those are the only things I'd run it through. So the bullet designs on these are solid copper with our Fort Scott TUI, and it's just meant to tumble. Simple as that. Now with our Xtreme Defender, it has that flutes in it, and the flutes are supposed to kind of disrupt fluid and whatnot. Now our NovX here, it's pretty much the same design in a sense as our Xtreme bullet here, but this is made out of a polymer copper matrix. So basically, like, they took copper filings and plastic and made a concrete out of it and molded a bullet out of it. And then we have flutes in it. And I could see how some of this ammunition might perform well as far as not getting over penetration. So we're going to see what we get with this ammo. So I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy I get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic test. So we're just going to go into plain clear ballistics, see what our best potential is of these rounds, see how they perform. And then after that, I'm going to put on 4 layers of denim. Even though we don't need it for a test like this, I like to stay consistent. 4 layers of denim on the front of 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent hitting our pectoral muscle. By the way, clear ballistics is half as dense as real flesh. That's why no more than 18 inches is what you want to see. People are not 18 inches thick, they're about half that thick. But after 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent our pectoral muscle, I'm going to put in a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum. So our plain clear ballistic shot will be just our best potential of those cartridges, and having the rib simulation and the denim will be more of our real world simulation test. And after that, I am going to shoot at my steel. I don't know what distances yet, but I do want to see, you know, what kind of shootability I can get with these. So I'll probably go up a little bit closer than normal, see what I can do on steel, and then maybe back it up. So let's get started with this test. All right, Fort Scott TUI 95 grain. I just looked this up on the internet here, and it does look like it's right at 940 feet per second through a 4-inch barrel. So this is close to a 4-inch. Let's see how close we get to 940 feet per second on my M&P here. 947. 880. 897. No read. No read. No read. That's pretty historic that I do have issues with solid copper rounds reading through my chronographs. Now next up we have our Xtreme Defender loaded by Lehigh, 68 grain I believe, rated at 1100 feet per second. See how close we get to that. 1070. No read. 1050. 1045. 1031. 1028. So a bit below rate of velocity, and they said 3.8 inch, and this is about 3.7 inch, so that's a little low. Let me run that NovX ammo now and see how that does for our velocity. The thing interesting about this ammo is it's like a 2-piece brass. There's a bottom piece here, and it rolls into a different piece. It's very interesting. The the sound of the ammunition is also very interesting sounding. So this stuff is rated at 1,400 feet per second. There's no barrel length listed, but that is pretty fast velocity no matter the bullet weight here, 56 grains. So let's see how close we get to that 1,400 feet per second. No read. It looks like I pulled it to the right, which is interesting. I don't recall pulling the trigger that way, but let me try to get a read here. 1258. I'm aiming a little bit to the left, and it's still hitting center. 1265. 1250. So, you know, interesting that, you know, this ammo doesn't really want to read over the chronograph all that well. All these today, interesting, because past month or so I haven't had a single error. So we got below rated velocity in basically all of these. So doesn't mean they're bad. It just means, you know, this is one of the longest barrel 380s out there. So why not have the actual rating for something like this? So let's try our Ballistic gel block with these and see how they compare. All right, best potential, just plain gel. I'm going to do our Fort Scott TUI that's meant to tumble. And then I'm going to do the Lehigh with the Xtreme defense bullet that's meant to just have that fluid thing going on where it slows down, and then our engagement extreme. So here's our Fort Scott TUI. Here's our Lehigh bullet. Here's our NovX bullet. We'll take a look. All right, so I did see when I made those shots that it looked like the NovX bullet did jiggle this quite a bit, as were the other ones not so much. But what we're looking at here is it actually looks like the least amount of actual damage is going to be with that Fort Scott. We got adequate penetration. We got 16.5 inches. We have some damage around here. There's probably an indication of tumbling right here. It's not massive damage though. When we look at, I'm going to go up to our NovX here, because that looks the same pretty much, but with less penetration, which, you know, that's something you would expect because it has such low sectional density. Of course, it's not going to penetrate very far, moving that fast with 56 grains. But what we got is about 13.25 inches. We have good damage, there's no doubt on that. Now with our Lehigh bullet there, that has a huge energy dump up here, which is interesting. It just looks like a massively expanded hollow point up here between about the 4 and 6 inch mark. Then it mellows out, and then right between about the 10 and the 12 inch mark, there's another big dump there of something going on. Looks like that one's probably tumbling. And then we stopped at about 14.5 inches of penetration. So statistically, all these did fine as far as our penetration goes, but I'm going to say, just based on what I'm seeing in gel, just using gel as a reference here, which isn't necessarily going to represent the real world, but just using gel, I'm going to say the Xtreme Defender bullet with our Lehigh did the best here. So let's put on our Denim and our MDF and see how they compare that way. All right, same order, but this time we have Denim and then our rib simulation after our pectoral muscle simulation. So here's our Fort Scott TUI. See how this does. Let's try our Xtreme Defender now. All right, Lehigh Xtreme Defense. All right, that thing actually exited the bottom of the block, so I'm going to do one more of our Xtreme Defender bullet here. See if I get a better representation here. Now I'm going to do our NovX Engagement Extreme. All right, NovX Engagement Extreme. See how this does. Go take a look. All right, so our first shot here was with our Fort Scott TUI, and it's right here, and it didn't actually exit the bottom of the block, even though it looks like it almost did. So I kept that and I didn't do another shot. We have a good amount of damage right here. That looks pretty typical of tumbling. That looks like good damage. And we went to about 14 inches even. Now, our first Xtreme Defender went down here. It's under the block. I can't really count it. Our second one, though, it looks almost the same as our Fort Scott. It's back here a little bit. You can kind of see the damage. It pretty much is identical to our Fort Scott, except we got a little bit less penetration, about 12 3/4. It's still acceptable. Now our NovX ammunition, what we're seeing there is it has just a little bit less damage than the Fort Scott and the Xtreme Defender. And what we're looking at here is just barely hitting 12 inches, which doesn't really surprise me at all. The bullet doesn't look like it fragmented or anything like that. So in our real world test, you know, both of our Xtreme Defender at about 12 3/4 and about, you know, 13 3/4 with our Fort Scott, both about the same. I'm going to call that as being both about the same because the damage is roughly the same. So interesting. Now what I want to do here is I want to shoot at my steel. I think I'm going to start at 12 yards, see if there's a difference in shootability with these rounds, because that might make a difference to me if one has less recoil than the other. So here's our recovered bullets, and it is something to note that they were all backwards. And why that matters is it means they all tumbled. And tumbling damage can create, you know, as much damage as a hollow point, even without an expanded hollow point. And the reason why is because lengthwise, bullets are generally going to be wider than what a non-expanded bullet would be. So, you know, let's take for instance here, let me pull out my carry round gold dot here, put that to the side. That's 355 diameter. Look, the Fort Scott's got to be at least 55, 60 caliber, which is about the diameter of a typical expanded hollow point. So in that regard, the fact that they're tumbling, that's going to create a lot of damage. And with our NovX bullet there, you know, there's a lot to be desired with that, because if you were to hit a hard barrier, it's probably going to fragment up. As we're with our solid copper, these actually could have an advantage over hollow points in the fact that because they're solid copper, you know, copper is roughly twice as hard as lead through and through. If you were to hit a windshield with that, it would keep going through, and if it hit the target on the other side, it would probably still tumble. So that's going to be definitely better than that in that regard, and probably even better than a typical hollow point. So I just want to show those. All right, I'm actually back 15 yards from the target. You know, being solid copper bullets, I want to be just a little bit further back from the steel because they're not going to smush like a lead and just fall straight down. But what I want to do is kind of see our practical shootability. We have our Fort Scott TUI here first. What I want to do is I want to pull it up and get a sight alignment and then just pop off what's in this gun here as fast as I think I can make those shots, and to see how they do for me. So here is our Fort Scott. All right, I missed one. It's probably just me. Now, if I can find my reload here. Here's our Xtreme Defender by Lehigh. Same thing, I'm gonna pull up, get a sight picture, and see what I can do. All right. Those felt a little bit better to me as far as, you know, like just how they felt for shooting. Yeah, I would not say that the Fort Scott had more recoil or less recoil. It's just kind of a little bit different, kind of like, I don't know, like the difference between shooting a 40 and a 45, where it's like that little bit heavier TUI had a little more muzzle jump, but not any more actual recoil. So here's our NovX ammo. Same thing, pull up and see if I can make some hits. All right, so that ammo felt a little weird to me. You know, when we're talking about shooting, a lot of times you have that certain timing that you expect with certain calibers. Like a 45, you expect boom, and then you're on and you keep doing it. 380 has kind of the same thing where you expect a certain thing, and this is more of like a lift up, push back, weird thing, like with the NovX. So it was a little bit warm. Me missing once or twice Could just be me, but you know, as far as personal choice, I would not necessarily want to carry that around. So I want to back it up and just see what kind of accuracy I can get a little distance. I know most of the time that type of testing doesn't really matter to most people, because they're never going to shoot from a distance. But for me, when you hear about a lot of the weird stuff happening in the world, you hear about shots that are made at 40 yards and beyond, you kind of want to know. So I'm going to shoot from 75 yards and just kind of see what this stuff will do for me. All right, 75 yards from the target. I generally really like doing this test, specifically when we have ammo that I'm comparing, and I really am thinking they're both really close. I can't decide which one's better. Sometimes our long range accuracy, if one will shoot better, then I'll call that one as being probably a little better. So Fort Scott TUI, pretty windy today, but let's see what we can get. 75 yards, I'm just gonna aim center mass, see what I can get. Do not know where that hit. Try again. I don't know. All right, I believe they're shooting a little bit high. Let me aim a little low. All right, I didn't really see consistency with that. It looked like some of my shots were hitting really high and some were hitting really low, despite aiming roughly in the same area and just bring it down a little bit. So next up we have our Lehigh here. I'm gonna aim center mass, see if I can make any hits. So maybe it's just me today, because it just seemed like I'm having a little bit of difficulty making these hits. And if I can find the ammo I brought back with the NovX, I'll load that up. It's in my pocket, deep in my pocket. So our NovX Engagement Xtreme. Let's see how this does. Not sure what to expect for where it might hit, but I'll try. All right, let me aim below the target. Wow, wow. I hit my camera protector again. I was aiming center mass the first few shots, and then it doesn't always translate on camera, but those shots were hitting above the target by a couple feet, and then I aimed probably just a foot lower than that, and their impact shifted by about 9 feet and went down. Let me just aim center mass again. That one hit to the left about 6 feet. And that's kind of what I saw at 5 yards. Even at 5 yards, I was aiming center, and I had to actually aim over about 3 inches, and it was hitting to the right, 3 inches to the right on paper at 5 yards. So I'm seeing that translation here. We're hitting several feet to the right with this ammunition. So I don't know if it's a lack of momentum out there with such a light bullet or what is going on with that. But judging from what I saw in the gel test, nothing about that looked impressive. We had less penetration than the others, less damage, weird recoil even at 12 yards or 15 yards, and just crazy off accuracy at 75. So I'm calling the NovX out right now. I would never use that ammo. There's no reason to. Now this becomes more difficult looking between the Fort Scott TUI and the Xtreme Defender. When I first came out here, I had kind of a pre-notion I was going to kind of call it, but I can't necessarily call it now after seeing this. What I was going to say was, with the Fort Scott and with the Xtreme Defender, here, okay, you're using like fluid going into those flutes, and it's supposed to disrupt whatever and cause tissue damage. That kind of goes against common knowledge when it comes to ballistics, because we're looking at causing damage just based on motion and not actual hollow point cutting. What you're looking at is your bullet is still just going to be that 35 caliber bullet. You know, everybody knows that you have to hit like 2,200 feet per second or something like that in order to cause like that type of tissue damage that shuts down organs. So just based on that, and based on the fact that if we look at a Fort Scott TUI bullet, it should be actually longer because it's heavier, and we're actually tumbling. Therefore, it's actually using a bullet to cut things open the way an expanded hollow point would do. However, looking at this test, what I saw was the Xtreme Defender, it just was more consistent in the way it caused damage in our plain gel shop. And even though it goes against ballistic science, I guess, damage is still damage, and I'm seeing that. So it's doing it somehow. And also on top of that, I did still see tumbling. It looked like the bullet was just about as long as the Fort Scott. And it was also tumbling when going through our medium density fiberboard. So I'm gonna say it looks like it's kind of doing everything that Fort Scott can do, but doing it a little bit better. So, and the shootability was just a little bit better, even at 12 yards and everything. And the misses back here, it's probably just me today, although I felt like I was aiming pretty well and shooting pretty well today. But I'm gonna say, just based on all this test, I think our Lehigh Defense bullet won this one, and it's probably the best cartridge, compared to these other two out there. So that's what you get today with that. And again, thank you to Edward B., one of my Patreon supporters, for supplying this ammunition. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.